Time has expired. I thank him for his contribution. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. I offer the call to the member for Indi.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak about the Higher Education and Research Reform Bill 2014. I acknowledge the previous speaker, and I would like to explain why I will not be supporting the bill in this House. My message is that accessible regional tertiary education is the key to the future of regional Australia, and any reforms need to put the need and the future of regional and rural students, communities, businesses and institutions at the centre. I will be talking today about a forum we held in Wodonga last week, and I will call for Plan B, C or D until we get this right. Reform is needed in the higher education sector. I agree with the government on this issue. There are beneficial amendments in this current bill. However, the many consequences of the proposed deregulation of universities, which, as the Minister has stressed, the core of the legislation, has too many disadvantages for those of us who live, work and want to study in regional areas. Mr Deputy Speaker, I've been listening to students, to teachers, to tertiary education staff, to business owners, to local government, to parents, to the many Indi constituents who have sought to meet with me and express their concerns with the deregulation of the universities. They have told me stories, worried about the unanswered questions, the cost and the many detrimental impacts that a deregulation system would have on the future viability of regional and rural communities. I have heard too many stories of unintended consequences, too many stories of unanswered questions and problematic situations for me to be able to support this legislation. My constituents have asked me to work with the government to come up with a better approach, a more inclusive approach, an approach that doesn't make regional students, communities and businesses suffer even greater disadvantage. Uniformly, I've been told that regional universities are much more than teaching institutions. They form the economic development and innovation hub for communities around them. They are the essential ingredient for the growth of our professions: agriculture, health, accounting, the legal profession, business management, pharmacy, planning, engineers, bankers. They all rely on locally based quality provision of graduate and postgraduate courses. Mr Deputy Speaker, I was elected to this House with a clear vision for my electorate: to work for a prosperous, caring community alive with opportunities for all. A significant part of this vision was a call to action on behalf of my community to address the inequalities currently being experienced in regional Australia, especially by young people, specifically those inequalities which include access to quality, relevant, accessible educational opportunities. And I am opposing this legislation because I believe it does not and will not make regional Australia a more caring place, a more prosperous place, nor will it grant greater opportunities in the region. I have not been convinced that the changes made, and here I would like to acknowledge the Minister on his taking on board many suggestions made by colleagues in the other place. But I do not believe the changes made in Mark 1 and now Mark 2 will make tertiary education more accessible, more relevant and of greater quality for regional communities. I believe that regional communities will be severely disadvantaged by this legislation. I also believe that the process to develop the legislation is faulty. In rural parlance, we talk about making a silk purse from a sow's ear. This process has not been inclusive. The way we do things, the people, the stakeholders we involve, is equally as important as the what we do. And talking about process, about consultation with stakeholders, I would like to place on record the outcomes of a forum held in Wodonga on Monday the 2nd of February. Over 130 participants attended from all sectors of my community. This forum was hosted by La Trobe and Charles Sturt universities, and keynote speakers included the two Vice-Chancellors, local business people, representative of the Regional Universities Network and Albury-Wodonga Health. There were three key themes: considering regional students in the proposed education reforms. There was a presentation by Professor Sue Trinidad, who's the Director of the National Centre for Student Equity in Higher Education from John Curtin Institute of Public Policy. Opportunities and Challenges Facing Rural Universities and the Regional Workforce, Dr Carolyn Perkins, the Director of the Regional Universities Network, RUN, and the role of higher education, particularly in health, Adjunct Professor Susan O'Neill, CEO of Albury-Wodonga Health. And one of the more interesting consultative processes of the day were the 3 participatory workshop sessions and panels. We talked about pathways to success, raising higher educational aspirations and participation levels of regional and rural people. This was facilitated by Mr Vern Hilditch, who's the principal of Wodonga Secondary College. We had a workshop on higher education and building sustainable regional and rural communities. This workshop was facilitated by Professor Richard Speed, Pro-Vice-Chancellor, Regional for La Trobe University. And the third workshop on regional and rural workforce, the role of higher education, was facilitated by Julia Coyle, Dean of Students of Headed Campus at CSU. There were some key findings from the forum. First, about student equity. University participation is lower in regional areas, and it's not increasing as fast as in metro areas. This situation has not changed, and it is not changing. And as a result, in 2014, the proportion of 20 to 64-year-olds with a bachelor degree or higher in regional areas was 17.7% in remote areas, 16.2% in regional areas, 17.7% in regional and 16.2% in remote, and this compares with 32.6% in metro areas. Just totally unsatisfactory. And reasons behind this by DWA tell us its access, its cost, its schooling, its socio-economic status, its aspiration. And at the forum, we discussed taking a student-centred approach to education. And how does this information manifest itself in regional areas? There are 2 ways. In rural areas, there's a lack of knowledge about universities. Only 25% of students currently at university had their parents at university. So most young people's parents didn't go to uni, so they don't understand what's involved and they don't offer first-hand advice on higher education. And secondly, there is a lack of confidence in young people's ability to attend university. The forum considered student outcomes, and the group asked the question, when designing higher education for rural and regional communities, what are the key considerations? And there were 2 main findings. First, create engagement with school students and parents, build pathways, early outreach to schools and communities, linked to later year outreach, pathway programs, scholarships, bridging programs at school, establish pathways to enable students to move from school to TAFE or universities, not only from country to the city, but also within the regions. And the second major strategy was build partnership with schools, communities and industry. The key to doing this is to talk about university education in general and its relevance to careers and set lifetime goals, and to start early with regular contact, Year 7 onwards, and to go deeper, increasing knowledge about universities and building confidence about universities. At the forum, Mr Deputy Speaker, we also discussed the role of higher education in the workforce, and this is a particular passion of mine. Albury-Wodonga Health is the 2nd largest employer in Albury-Wodonga. It's a regional health service, and it takes at least 4 hours to drive from Albury-Wodonga to the nearest metro centre, in our case Melbourne. And the Albury-Wodonga Health relies on community and care interdependency. There's a very slow and low turnover of staff. People stay. And the attraction, recruitment and retention of health professionals is directly related to our ability to provide tertiary education. And some of the specialist skills employed by Albury-Wodonga Health include professional nurses, paramedics, physiotherapy, speech, social work, occupational therapy, psychology, accounting, business management, human resource management and marketing. And we need these locally. Because as we learned, in Albury-Wodonga Health, 70% of the jobs for that health service need professional tertiary education qualifications. 70%. And it's estimated that only 20% of the people have the necessary tertiary qualifications. And that's now. That's not talking into the future. But we absolutely know that when people study locally, they stay locally. So while the forum confirmed that the people are looking for reforms in the sector, we all agree it could be better, more relevant, more efficient, more accessible, more student-friendly, and we all need better access to broadband and mobile phones. The very strong response from participants was that what was being proposed did not meet the needs. So I believe we are faced with a question of process and outcome. And I've always liked the quote about the future. The future is not some place we are going to. The future is a place we are creating. The paths to it are not found but made, and the making of the pathways changes both the maker and the destination. In reforming and improving the higher education sector, we are making a new path. The paths are not pre-existent, we're making them. And it's in the making of these pathways that we make our future. And I want a future for regional Australia. I want a future of win-win. Regional Australia better and the city better. But this current legislation has focused particularly on the needs of the university sector. True, it's got many of the VCs agreeing with it, but it hasn't focused on other important stakeholders, businesses, employees, those who employ the graduates, and it hasn't focused on the key issue of government investment in infrastructure. What is it that universities are, the educational infrastructure, that act as an engine, a driver for regional development, regional innovation, regional growth? And I believe in the formation of this second draft of legislation, the process has been flawed. The people who have a vested interest in an outcome, the people I represented, have not been involved. The rural and regional students who are already paying excessive amounts to go to university for accommodation, for travel and living expenses. The regional businesses desperate for locally trained, skilled professionals, and the regional development and the planning authorities who are calling on the Commonwealth to play a lead role in the long term, plan for sustainable regional communities with a solid foundation in excellent infrastructure, excellent education infrastructure. And as an independent member for this House, I see it as my job, it's my duty, in fact it's my role to speak up on these issues. I need to stand up, to fight, to be heard with the best of my skills, to ensure that we as a parliament have the best legislation possible. I need to take action, to walk the talk of participation. I need to be evidence-based, and I need my actions to be informed by my electorate. And this is my intention in speaking to this legislation, to share the knowledge and outcomes of our regional forum, to make a sincere offer to the Minister to meet and work with him on how these issues can be addressed, and to be solutions-focused. Let me remind this House that the expense of university study and living away from home is already too great for many rural and regional students. Our participation is significantly lower, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for young people to see a pathway for themselves without the burden of debt from higher education. The time is here and now to focus on alternative frameworks, a framework that is equitable and accessible for all Australians, no matter where they live. And Mr Deputy Speaker, in closing, I'd briefly like to mention some of the outcomes from the specific outcomes from the forum, and close by calling on the Minister to consider a Plan C. Regional tertiary education warrants a higher order in policy. There is a need for a holistic consideration for relationships between communities, employees and individuals within regional tertiary education policy design. There is a need to better support interaction across TAFE and higher education and cut through perceptions of cost shifting between the state and the Commonwealth Government. More. In closing, higher education is too important for Australia to let through poor legislation. It's too important for all regional Australians. We need to, all Australians. We need to consult, we need to involve all sectors, and we need to look for a win-win. We need a strong university sector, we need strong undergraduates, and most important, we need good legislation. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
I thank the member for her contribution. The question is